The Empress No One Wanted. HFY Sci-Fi Story. The stars above Zelrath Prime shimmered like frozen tears. Deep inside the Imperial Palace, the great halls stood silent, filled with cold silver light. Once the palace had echoed with laughter and song, but now only the sound of distant footsteps remained. Empress Lyravel sat upon her floating throne, her legs unmoving, her silver eyes staring out into the void beyond the crystal walls. She was once the most powerful being in the Orion Arm, a warrior queen who had led her fleets through 10 wars. She had fought the invaders from the Outer Rim and saved her people at the cost of her own body. A plasma burst had shattered her spine, leaving her paralyzed from the waist down. Since that day, the galaxy whispered behind her back, calling her the Broken Empress. In the beginning, the people loved her. They built statues and sang songs of her courage. But time changed everything. The nobles began to see her as weak, unfit to rule and cursed by fate. They said an empress who could not walk, could not lead. Even her own council avoided her gaze, pretending to care while plotting to remove her. Every night she sat alone in her chamber, surrounded by the cold hum of life support machines. Her doctors promised miracles, but none came. Her reflection in the mirror showed not a queen, but a shadow of who she once was. Still, her heart refused to break. She ruled with grace and calm, never showing anger, never begging for pity. One day the Galactic Council sent a decree that shook the Empire. They demanded that the Empress must produce an heir within one cycle, or the throne would be passed to another. It was a law written long ago, but no one had dared to use it. Until now, they gave her a list of noble suitors, strong warriors, rich lords, and alien princes. Every single one of them refused. Some said she was unworthy. Others said she was no longer pure. Some laughed, some turned away in silence. In the royal court she sat still, her hands trembling slightly. As rejection after rejection filled the air, the nobles watched, amused. The High Minister bowed and said coldly, "Your Majesty, it seems no one wishes to share the burden." Her lips curved into the faintest smile. "Then I will carry it alone," she whispered. But inside her heart something cracked. For the first time, she felt truly alone. Even the servants treated her with quiet fear. Her personal guard avoided her gaze, unsure whether to protect her or to pity her. When she looked out from her balcony at the shining city below, she saw her people, proud, strong, and unaware that their empress wept each night. She had saved millions, but no one would stand beside her now. As the days passed, whispers grew louder. They called her throne cursed. They said the galaxy would soon choose a new ruler, and still she remained silent, never complaining, never breaking her poise. But in the hidden corridors of her mind, she wished for something impossible, for someone who would see her not as a broken ruler, but as a person. Then one morning a new sound echoed through the palace gates. Engines roared, deep, metallic, and unfamiliar. The guards rushed to their posts as a Terran vessel descended from orbit. Human markings, unknown in this part of the galaxy, glowed on its hull. The last time a human ship had entered Zelrath space, it had been during the war. Now one came in peace, carrying a single envoy. The court gathered, whispering, curious and fearful. When the doors opened, a man in a worn black uniform walked forward. He was tall for a human, with short brown hair and eyes that carried both calm and danger. He bowed slightly, not as a subject but as an equal. "Captain Ryan Hale, Terran Federation," he said, his voice steady. Gasps rippled through the chamber. A human. Here, standing before their empress, the nobles hissed insults under their breath, calling him fragile, primitive, unworthy. The empress studied him quietly. He did not look away from her as others did. His gaze did not carry pity, only understanding. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Lyravel said softly, "Welcome to Zelrath. Human." Her voice, though soft, carried a strange strength. Ryan bowed again. "Thank you, Your Majesty," he said. The courtiers exchanged glances, shocked that he addressed her with respect. That night, from her throne room window, she watched his ship resting in the hangar below. She wondered what kind of man he was, one who had come across the stars to stand before a queen everyone had abandoned. And for the first time in years, a flicker of curiosity stirred inside her broken heart. She did not know that this meeting would change everything, her fate, her empire, and perhaps even the balance of the galaxy. In the shadows of the throne hall, old voices whispered that the age of the Empress was ending. But the stars above Zelrath Prime burned brighter that night. as if the universe itself knew that a new story was about to begin. A story of courage, humanity, and love that would shake the entire galaxy. The Human Envoy. HFY Sci-Fi Story. The next morning, the palace was alive with whispers. A human had entered Zelrath Prime, and the nobles could not stop talking about it. They called it madness, an insult to their honor, a sign of weakness from their empress, but Empress Liravel sat quietly on her throne, her silver eyes watching the chamber doors, waiting for the visitor to return. Captain Ryan Hale walked through the hall surrounded by guards who stared at him like he was a wild beast. He did not flinch, he did not lower his eyes. His steps echoed against the marble floors, heavy and calm. He had seen worse eyes before, the eyes of alien soldiers on burning worlds. He had fought in the same war that had left the Empress crippled, and deep inside he carried his own scars. When he entered the throne room again, all voices stopped. The Empress looked at him, and for the first time, there was something gentle in her gaze. "Captain Hale," she said softly, "I was told you bring words from the Terran Federation." Ryan bowed slightly. "Yes, Your Majesty, I come with peace and a message of respect." The nobles snickered, whispering to each other, "Humans and respect? Impossible." But the Empress raised her hand and silence fell again. She looked at him with curiosity. "Tell me, human, why come here after so many years of silence?" Ryan's voice was low, almost tired. "Because peace only means something if we learn from our pain." Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if she felt the weight of those words. She had expected arrogance or fear, but not this quiet honesty. She leaned forward on her floating throne. "And what did your people learn from ours?" Ryan looked up at her. "That strength without mercy destroys everything it touches." The hall was silent. No one dared to speak, no one dared to breathe. The Empress felt something stir in her heart. A memory of long ago when warriors spoke truth without fear. When the meeting ended, she ordered that the human be allowed to stay within the palace. The nobles protested, calling it dangerous, but she silenced them with a single word. Enough. That night, Ryan was escorted to the guest quarters near the Western Gardens. He stood on the balcony looking at the twin moons, remembering the battlefields he had left behind. He had come here thinking he would meet a cruel alien ruler, but instead he found a woman trapped by her own people. A queen without allies, surrounded by enemies dressed as friends. Something about her silence reminded him of Earth after the wars. Broken, but still alive, he could not explain it. But he felt he was meant to be here the next day. The Empress summoned him again, not in the court, but in her private garden. The garden was filled with glowing blue trees and whispering fountains. Ryan stopped at the edge, unsure if he was allowed to step closer. "Come," she said. Her voice softer now. He walked toward her, and for the first time, he noticed the small tremor in her hands as she controlled her floating chair. "You saved your people once," she said quietly, "and yet you stand before me, the enemy who failed hers." Ryan shook his head slowly. "No, Your Majesty, you didn't fail, you survived." Her eyes widened slightly. No one had ever said those words to her. Most only saw her broken body, not the courage beneath it. For a long time, they sat in silence under the glowing trees. She asked him about Earth, about the oceans, the mountains, the cities of glass and light. He told her stories, of children running through rain, of music played on old instruments, of humans rebuilding from ashes. She listened like a child hearing light for the first time. When he finished, she said softly, "Humans sound fragile." He smiled faintly. "Maybe, but we are very hard to kill." A small laugh escaped her lips, a sound she had not made in years. The guards watching from a distance could not believe their eyes. The broken Empress was smiling and at a human, but in the council chambers above, the nobles watched through secret monitors. They whispered that the human was a danger, that he would corrupt her mind. Some even plotted to remove him before he could do more harm. That evening, during a grand assembly, the Empress appeared before the nobles again. She looked stronger than she had in years, her hair shining beneath the crystal lights. Ryan stood quietly beside her throne, acting as an observer. But when one of the nobles spoke with venom, "Everything changed, Your Majesty," the noble sneered. "Perhaps the human can stand in for your missing consort." The court laughed cruelly. Liravel's hands tightened on her chair, and before she could speak, Ryan stepped forward. "Enough," he said calmly. "Where I come from, we don't mock those who gave everything for their people." The laughter died instantly, replaced by uneasy silence. The Empress looked at him, eyes shimmering with something unspoken. No one had ever defended her before. Not her ministers, not her guards. Not even her family. She wanted to speak. But her voice trembled. "Captain Hale," she said softly, "you may leave now." But as he turned, she added, "Thank you." That one word stayed in his mind all night, echoing through the silence of his room. Outside, the city lights shimmered like distant embers, and Ryan realized something deep within him. This world was dying. Not from war, but from cold hearts, and if no one else would fight for her, then perhaps he would. He did not know it yet. But fate had already chosen him, the human who would change the destiny of an empire, and the heart of an empress who had forgotten how to hope. The Broken Throne. HFY Sci-Fi Story days turned into weeks, and whispers filled every corner of the palace. The human was still there, walking beside the Empress as if he belonged. The nobles hated it, the guards feared it, and the servants didn't know what to believe. To them, humans were violent creatures from a death world, creatures that fought even when dying. Yet this one, this Ryan Hale, spoke softly, carried no weapon, and still, his presence made the proudest alien warriors uneasy. Every morning, he would walk with the Empress through her garden. Sometimes they spoke of politics, sometimes of old battles, and sometimes of nothing at all. Liravel had not spoken so freely in years, and Ryan listened without judgment. He never flinched when she talked about her pain, never looked away when she moved her lifeless legs with trembling hands. One morning she said quietly, "They all think I am weak." Ryan looked at her and answered, "Then stop letting them decide what strength means." Those words echoed inside her long after he left that day. No one had ever told her that she could choose her own meaning. She had been born into duty, raised to fight, and chained to the throne by tradition. Now, for the first time, she began to wonder, what if she could break the chain? In the council chambers, however, the nobles were restless. Lord Varos, her cousin and closest rival, slammed his hand on the table. "That human is poisoning her mind," he hissed. "If we do not act, our bloodline will be tainted," another noble added. "The people already whisper that she smiles again, that she laughs because of him. They plan to use this against her, to turn her newfound warmth into a weapon of shame." That evening, a council meeting was called. The chamber was filled with shimmering light from the twin moons above. The Empress entered slowly, her floating chair gliding across the polished floor. Ryan followed a few steps behind, silent, respectful. Lord Varos bowed with false politeness. "Your Majesty," he said, "we must discuss your companion." Liravel's eyes narrowed. "Speak clearly, cousin," she said. Her tone calm but dangerous. Varos smiled thinly. "The people are losing faith. They say their Empress shares her time with a human male." Gasps filled the room. But Ryan stood still, his face expressionless. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Liravel said, "And if I do?" Her voice cold as the void. "What concern is it of yours?" Varys leaned forward. "He is not one of us. He cannot sit in your presence. He cannot share your bond. He cannot give you an heir." Ryan took a slow breath but said nothing. He knew this was not his fight to speak in, not yet. The Empress looked directly at her cousin. "You forget," she said softly. "I decide who belongs in my presence." Her words were sharp enough to silence the entire room. After the meeting, Ryan found her alone in the royal hall. She sat in her floating chair, staring at the great mural on the ceiling, a painting of her younger self leading armies to victory. Her reflection shone faintly in the marble floor below, showing a queen who had lost everything but still refused to fall. He walked closer and said gently, "You handled them well." She didn't turn. "They are not wrong," she whispered. "I am broken. I cannot give my people what they want." Ryan knelt beside her, his voice calm and steady. "Maybe they don't need what they want. Maybe they need what they've forgotten. Hope." Her silver eyes met his, and for the first time she looked uncertain, almost human that night as the twin moons rose higher. A soft knock came at Ryan's chamber door. When it opened, he saw the Empress there, dressed not in royal armor but in a simple gown, her face pale in the moonlight. "Walk with me," she said, and he followed her through the silent halls. They stopped at the grand balcony overlooking the sleeping city. "Do you ever wonder," she asked quietly, "why you came here?" Ryan looked at the glowing towers below. "I thought it was duty. Maybe it's something more." She turned her gaze toward him. "You humans confuse me," she said. "You break so easily, and yet you never stop standing back up." Ryan smiled faintly. "That's what makes us human. For a long while." They stood in silence, then she said softly, "When I fell in battle, I thought my life ended there. They said my injury was punishment, that my bloodline was cursed." Her voice trembled slightly. "But when you lifted me that day, when no one else dared touch me, I felt alive again." Ryan looked at her, the wind brushing through her silver hair. "You're more alive than all of them," he said. "They just can't see it yet." Something deep within her stirred. Not duty, not pain, but warmth. Something she had buried long ago. The next morning, she arrived in the throne room earlier than anyone expected. She wore her battle crown for the first time since her injury. Her voice was clear as she declared before the court, "From this day forward, humanity shall stand as an ally of Zelrath." The nobles erupted in outrage, shouting, accusing, protesting, but she raised her hand and silence fell once more. "Let them fear the unknown," she said, her gaze sweeping over them. "For I no longer do." Ryan watched her from the side, pride flickering in his eyes. The Empress had changed, not just in strength but in spirit. The same woman who once sat in silence now ruled with a quiet fire. And deep inside, both of them knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy would soon witness something it had never seen before. A broken throne rising again, carried not by power, but by courage and a human's impossible heart. The Trial of Bloodlines. HFY Sci-Fi Story. The Galactic Council had gathered under the massive dome of the Hall of Stars. It was the most sacred chamber in the Zelrath Empire, where every ruler had once sworn loyalty to the throne. Now that same hall shimmered with anger, whispers and the cold light of judgment. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the slow hum of the Empress's floating throne as she entered. Her golden crown glowed faintly beneath the silver beams of the ceiling. Behind her walked Captain Ryan Hale, dressed in the dark uniform of Earth's envoy, his boots echoing against the floor like a steady drumbeat. Dozens of alien nobles turned to glare at him, their eyes filled with hate and disbelief. A human walking beside an empress, and to them, it was blasphemy at the center of the chamber. Lord Varos rose from his seat, his cloak trailing behind him like a shadow. "Your Majesty," he said in a loud, sharp voice, "this council cannot ignore the shame that hangs over your rule." Liravel's voice was calm, but it carried power. "Speak, cousin," she said. Her eyes never blinking, Varos sneered. "You bring a creature of Earth into our court. You let him walk beside you, advise you, defend you. The people talk. They say the Empress has fallen," the chamber murmured with approval. Dozens of nobles nodding in agreement. Ryan stood still, hands behind his back. Silent but alert, Liravel raised her head slightly. "Is that what this council fears, Inine? That I have found an ally who treats me as an equal?" Varos smirked. "No, we fear that you have forgotten what it means to be Zelrath." He pointed toward Ryan, his claws gleaming under the light. "He cannot bond with you. His blood is not ours. His body cannot merge with your spirit. Our laws forbid it." Ryan's jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. The Empress looked around the chamber, her voice soft but clear. "And yet not one of you offered your blood when I asked." The hall fell silent. Her eyes burned with quiet fury. "You all refused me. You all turned away. And now you claim to defend my honor." A few nobles lowered their heads in shame, but Varos pressed on. "Then prove us wrong," he said. "Take the trial of bloodlines. Let the universe decide if this human's essence can survive our sacred bond." Gasps filled the air. The trial of bloodlines was an ancient ritual, a test of soul and spirit between rulers and mates. If a bond failed, both lives could be destroyed. Even the strongest warriors feared it. Liravel's fingers trembled slightly, but her voice did not. "If that is what you demand," she said softly, "then I accept." Ryan turned toward her. "You don't have to do this," he whispered. She met his eyes, her silver gaze steady. "I must, or they will never let me live in peace." He looked around the hall filled with creatures who wanted her to fail, and something inside him hardened. "Then I'll stand with you," he said quietly. "No matter what happens," Varos laughed. "You don't know what you're agreeing to, human? The trial will tear you apart." Ryan's voice was calm. "So be it." The lights dimmed, and the floor of the hall began to glow with ancient runes. The priests of the old ways stepped forward, chanting in a language older than stars. A beam of white light descended from above, surrounding both the Empress and the human. Their forms glowed as energy began to rise between them. Ryan felt his heart racing, heat surging through his veins. The Empress reached out her trembling hand and he took it without fear. A surge of power erupted, unblinding, fierce, and beautiful. The crowd gasped as their energy intertwined, swirling in patterns no one had ever seen before. The alien priest cried out, unable to believe their eyes. The bond did not reject him, it accepted him. The sacred energy wrapped around them both, their two hearts pulsing in perfect rhythm. And then the impossible happened. The Empress gasped and fell forward, her hands touching the ground, her legs trembling. Slowly, painfully she stood. The chamber fell silent as Liravel took her first step in years. Her long gown shimmered. Her crown glowed like a rising sun. The priests dropped to their knees. Whispering ancient words of awe, even Varos could not speak. His eyes wide with shock, Ryan stepped closer. Steadying her with one arm, she looked at him, tears glimmering in her eyes. "You," she whispered. "You healed me." He smiled faintly. "No, you healed yourself. I just stood beside you." The entire hall erupted into cries of disbelief and awe. The ancient bond had accepted a human, something no one thought possible. The priest declared it a sign of destiny, the fulfillment of a prophecy lost to time. "An outsider shall bring light to the fallen throne," they chanted, their voices echoing through the chamber. Liravel turned toward the council, her voice steady once more. "You called me broken," she said, "but it was your hearts that were crippled." Her gaze swept across the nobles, her voice sharp as thunder. "Now kneel." One by one, the nobles lowered themselves to the floor. Their pride shattered. Varos hesitated, his face pale. But when her eyes met his, he too bowed. The Empress stood tall, her crown blazing with light. Ryan stood beside her, quiet and calm, but his heart was racing. He had come as a diplomat, but now he was bound to a queen, bound by something deeper than politics or biology, by the bond of courage and compassion. That night the stars above Zelrath Prime shone brighter than ever before. The galaxy whispered of a miracle. The Empress who could not walk now stood again, and beside her stood the human who defied every law of the universe. Together they had rewritten the destiny of two worlds. The human bond. HFY Sci-Fi Story. The news of the impossible spread faster than light. Across every world in the Zelrath Empire, beings whispered the same words. The Empress walks again. Some bowed in reverence, others trembled in fear, for if the old prophecies were true, then destiny itself had changed. Inside the palace, the air felt alive. Servants who once walked with bowed heads now lifted their eyes when the Empress passed. Where there had been silence, there was now music. Soft and uncertain, but hopeful, Ryan walked beside her through the grand halls, still not used to the way everyone stared. Some with awe, others with hatred, but none with indifference. Liravel's steps were slow but steady, each one a victory over pain and time. Every night her body ached, but she refused the machines. She told Ryan, "If I must walk in pain, then let the galaxy see what strength costs." He answered quietly, "Then they'll never forget you." She smiled faintly. "And neither will you." The bond they shared pulsed softly like a living thread between their hearts. It was not just energy, it was emotion, memory, trust, and something more. When she hurt, he felt it. When he dreamed, she saw flashes of his world, oceans, forests, the laughter of children. One night she whispered, "Earth is beautiful," and he said, "You'd love the rain." Her laughter echoed like a melody he didn't know he'd missed. But peace never lasts long in a galaxy built on pride. Beyond the palace walls, powerful houses plotted in the shadows. They feared what the bond meant, that humans could merge with the royal bloodline, that the Empress might unite the galaxies under a single banner. The old lords met in secret, their words dripping with venom. "She has betrayed our kind," one hissed. "And replaced us with him," another whispered. "If the bond makes her strong, we must sever it." Inside the palace, Ryan began to notice things. Guards who looked away too quickly, servants who left messages unsent. He had lived through enough wars to recognize the smell of conspiracy. One evening, while the Empress was meeting with her generals, he followed a faint echo in the corridors. Voices, low, sharp, plotting. He stopped just beyond a corner and listened. "Tonight, during the renewal ceremony, the energy field will be destabilized. The human will die first, and the bond will break. Ryan's eyes narrowed, his mind already planning later that night. The renewal ceremony began. It was meant to mark the rebirth of the Empire, and of its ruler. The grand hall shimmered with light, banners fluttering like living flame. The Empress stood at the altar, her crown reflecting the twin moons above. Ryan stood behind her, silent and watchful. The priests began their chant, and power gathered in the air. He felt a strange vibration in the bond, like a warning pulse. He turned sharply just as a beam of dark energy sliced toward them from above. Without thinking, Ryan leapt forward. Pushing her aside, the beam struck his shoulder, burning through armor and flesh. The hall exploded into screams and chaos. Guards rushed in. Nobles fled. Smoke filled the air. Liravel fell to the ground, coughing, her eyes wide with fear. "Ryan," she cried, crawling toward him. "No. Stay with me." He groaned, trying to rise, his blood glowing faintly from the bond's energy. "I told you," he whispered weakly. "Humans are hard to kill." She held him tightly, the power between them flaring again. Her tears hit the floor, glowing where they fell. The priests gasped as the light from the bond grew brighter and brighter. Then without warning it burst outward, spreading across the hall like a storm. The assassins hidden in the shadows were thrown to the ground, their weapons disintegrating in the white fire. Every noble saw it, the bond defending them both as one being, one soul. The Empress rose, her eyes burning with silver fire. "Enough," she cried, her voice shaking the walls. "You tried to destroy what you could never understand." Her guards knelt instantly. Her enemies froze. She stood tall, lifting her wounded human in her arms as the light surrounded them both. The energy healed the burns on his skin, sealing the wound before their eyes. Ryan opened his eyes slowly, pain fading into disbelief. "You saved me," he murmured. She smiled softly through tears. "No, Ryan. We saved each other." As the light faded, silence filled the room. The priests bowed, whispering, "The prophecy is complete." Even the nobles who plotted her fall could not look her in the eye. The Empress turned to the crowd, her voice calm but fierce. "Let this night remind the galaxy the bond is not weakness," she said. "It is strength born from understanding." She looked at Ryan. "And humanity has shown us that even the smallest spark can reignite a dying star." Outside, fireworks filled the skies of Zelrath Prime. But this time they were not for victory or power. They were for hope, for the first time in generations. The people saw their Empress not as broken but reborn, and beside her stood the one who had crossed the stars, the human who had taught an empire the meaning of love and loyalty. The Rising Empire. HFY Sci-Fi Story. The galaxy no longer slept. Every news channel, every hollow screen, every alien network spoke the same name, the human and the Empress. The impossible bond had rewritten the laws of nature, and for the first time in centuries the Zelrath Empire had hope. But where there is light, darkness always gathers. Deep within the outer colonies, the noble houses began to stir. Those who had lost power under the Empress's new rule whispered of rebellion. They called her a traitor, a ruler possessed by a human curse. And in the shadows they gathered fleets, weapons and hatred. Inside the palace, life had changed. The halls that once felt cold now glowed with color and life. Children laughed again, music echoed through corridors, and the people sent offerings of flowers and crystals from distant worlds. Liravel stood on her balcony every dawn, her silver eyes watching the rising suns. Each morning she took one slow step forward, not because she needed to, but because she could, and always beside her stood Ryan, his gaze scanning the horizon. He had become more than a diplomat now. He was a protector, an advisor, and in quiet moments something more. Their bond had deepened. Their thoughts brushed against each other like passing waves. She could feel his heartbeat when danger neared, and he could feel her sorrow before she spoke a word. Together, they rebuilt an empire that had once forgotten its soul. But peace is never loved by those who crave control. One evening, as the twin moons rose, a coded transmission reached Ryan's console. Encrypted signals from the outer rim, ships gathering under an unknown banner. He replayed the message again and again, listening to the cold metallic voice repeating, "The true blood will rise." He walked to the throne room where Liravel was meeting her council. The moment she saw his expression, her smile faded. "They're coming," he said quietly, "and they're bringing war." The council erupted in panic. The ministers shouted, the generals argued, and the nobles demanded safety for their houses. But the Empress raised her hand and the room fell silent. "Let them come," she said, her voice steady. "The throne will not hide this time." Ryan nodded beside her. "Then we prepare for war." The next days passed like thunder. Human and Zelrath engineers worked side by side, rebuilding old weapons, reforging ancient ships. Earth sent advisors and supplies, their warships glowing bright in alien skies for the first time in history. Terran banners flew beside the sigil of the Empress. The galaxy watched, unsure whether to cheer or tremble. In the War Council, Ryan stood beside her, tracing the holographic map. "They'll strike here first," he said, pointing toward the outer colonies. "They'll want to take your trade worlds and starports." Lyravel nodded. "Then we'll meet them head on." Her generals hesitated, one of them bowing low. "Your Majesty, we cannot send you into battle." "It's too dangerous." She looked at him coldly. "You forget who I am." Her eyes flashed. "I was born on the battlefield, and I will die there if I must." Ryan wanted to stop her, but he saw the fire in her gaze, the same light that had made him cross galaxies to stand beside her. So he only said softly, "Then I'll fight with you." She smiled faintly. "You always do." When the first rebel fleet arrived, the sky over Zelrath burned red. Thousands of ships darkened the stars, their engines roaring like storms. But waiting for them was a sight no one expected. Human dreadnoughts floating beside alien warships, energy shields humming together in perfect harmony. At the center of it all stood the Empress's flagship, the Radiant Oath, and beside her command chair, Ryan stood in his black armor, ready. The battle began with a scream of light. Missiles tore through the void. Plasma fire danced between stars. But the Alliance held strong. Human pilots fought like demons, their ships weaving through enemy lines. Zelrath cruisers formed shields around them, their cannons blazing. Together they became something new, a fusion of strategy and courage that neither side had ever known. In the heart of battle, the rebel leader appeared on every transmission screen. It was Varos, his face twisted with rage. "You've doomed us all," he shouted. "You let a human infect our blood. Our legacy." Lyravel looked directly into the camera, her voice calm and clear. "I did not destroy our legacy," she said. "I saved it from becoming a cage." Then she gave the command, "Fire!" A beam of energy brighter than a sun tore through the rebel flagship. The explosion lit the void for miles. The battle was over, the rebellion crushed. Silence fell across the comms as the debris drifted among the stars. When they returned to Zelrath Prime, the people lined the streets in celebration. The Empress stood before them, armor cracked, crown scorched but unbroken. Ryan stood beside her, his hand resting gently on her arm. She looked at the crowd and said, "The Empire rises not through fear but through unity." Her voice echoed across the city. "And today we rise together." The people roared her name. Children held banners of both Earth and Zelrath. And for the first time in all recorded history, two worlds stood as one. The Empress turned to Ryan, her eyes soft. "You were right," she whispered. "They only needed hope." Ryan smiled faintly. "And you gave it to them." Above them, fireworks painted the skies. The Empire had survived stronger than ever. But both knew their story was not yet over. Because peace was fragile and destiny was still watching, waiting for its next move. The Empress Who Chose Humanity. HFY Sci-Fi Story. The war was over. The stars were quiet again. But silence after battle is never peace. It is the sound of wounds healing, and of hearts learning how to beat again. Across the Zelrath Empire, the banners of rebellion had burned away, leaving only smoke and rebuilding hands. From the highest towers to the deepest colonies, people spoke one name with reverence, Lyravel, the Empress who walked again, and beside her, the tales always whispered another name, Ryan Hale, the human who changed fate. Children played in the streets pretending to be them, one wearing a paper crown, the other holding a wooden stick like a Terran rifle. The galaxy, once divided by fear, now began to dream of unity in the throne hall. The Empress stood gazing at the great mural newly painted upon the ceiling. It showed not conquest or blood, but two hands on one alien, one human, clasped together beneath a rising sun. Ryan entered quietly, his uniform still marked with battle scars. "You rebuilt this world," he said softly. "But it cost you so much." She turned, smiling faintly. Every birth caused pain, Captain Hale. Even the birth of peace. He stepped closer, studying her face, the light catching the faint lines of exhaustion and strength. You can rest now, he said. Let others lead for a while. She shook her head slowly. A ruler rests only when her people forget her name. Then her tone softened. But a woman can rest when someone she trusts takes her hand. For a moment they stood in silence, the air heavy with meaning. Their bond shimmered faintly, a golden thread of light between their hearts. He could feel her heartbeat like an echo inside his chest, steady, alive, human. She reached up, her fingers brushing the mark of their bond on his wrist. You were never my subject, she whispered. You were my equal, but even in peace. Not every soul welcomed the new age beyond the borders. Distant empires watched with wary eyes. They feared the rise of a human-alien alliance stronger than any before. Some swore vengeance, others swore envy. The Council of 12 met in secret, speaking in shadows. If the Empress has chosen humanity, one hissed, then perhaps humanity must fall before her heart does. Back on Zelrath Prime, Ryan received coded transmissions from Earth. The Federation requested his return. Diplomats wanted him home. Generals wanted his report. He sat for hours staring at the message, feeling the pull of two worlds inside his chest. When Liravel entered his chamber, she already knew. The stars are calling you back, she said quietly. He nodded. I never thought leaving would feel this hard. Her voice trembled just slightly. Because you're not leaving a mission this time. You're leaving a part of yourself. At dawn, the human fleet prepared to depart. Thousands gathered in the city below to witness the farewell. The Empress walked slowly to the docking bay. Her robes flowing like silver fire, Ryan stood by his ship, saluting with the pride of both a soldier and a man torn between duty and love. When she reached him, the crowd fell silent. No words were spoken for a long moment. Only the hum of engines and the soft wind. Then she said, You came from a world the galaxy once feared. Yet you taught us mercy. Her voice carried across the crowd. Remember this, Captain Hale, you will always have a home in my skies. He smiled, eyes glistening. And you'll always have a place in my heart. Your Majesty? He turned aboard the ship. But before he could take a step, she reached out and held his hand. Not Majesty, she whispered. Just Lyra. The human crew watched in silence as their commander leaned forward and pressed his forehead gently against hers. The bond flared one last time, bright, endless, eternal. Then the ramp closed, engines roared, and the Terran flagship lifted into the light. The Empress stood alone, watching as the vessel vanished beyond the clouds. But she did not cry. She placed her hand over her heart where the bond still pulsed softly, and whispered, Go, my human, the stars are wide. But we are never apart. Months passed. Seasons changed, and the Empire flourished. Trade routes reopened, schools taught both languages, and hybrid children began to appear. Proof that love had done what science never could. In the Grand Archives, historians wrote a new chapter, The Age of Union, and every page began with the same words. When the Empress chose humanity years later, when Ryan returned at last, older, scarred, but still carrying that steady calm, he found her in the garden beneath the glowing trees. She turned at the sound of his voice, smiled, and said, You're late, he laughed softly. Traffic between galaxies, you know how it is. And as the twin moons rose, their hands found each other again. Not ruler and soldier, not alien and human, but two souls who had defied the universe together. Above them, the stars seemed to burn brighter than before. For somewhere, deep in the rhythm of creation itself, the cosmos remembered their story. The Empress who chose humanity, and the human who taught an empire how to love.